Welcome back to another Mainly Hoops episode. Back here with a general episode now as we're 2 weeks away from Selection Sunday. Going to dive a bit deeper into conference tournaments a little bit, the bubble for the NCAA tournament, and highlight some of the games from over the weekend. But pretty crazy. 2 weeks from right now, the bracket will be completely out and we'll be diving into all the matchups, filling out brackets, much like most of the people across the country. But for now, we're going to have to go for conference tournaments, which isn't so bad either. Some of the conference tournaments, one of them actually starts today. The ASUN, Stetson Central Arkansas, and who's the other game? Austin P, North Florida. Conference tournaments are now underway officially. The big conference tournaments, of course, won't start till next week. But man, we're in for some fun now over the next 5-6 weeks.
Yeah, for sure. I'm super excited. I mean, I would be okay with, fast forwarding through this last week of the regular season. It just feels like a bunch of, kind of anything can happen. Like motivation for certain teams is in other spots or in different spots anyway. Like teams on the bubble are super motivated to grab wins, and there are some teams that already locked up their conference championships, like St. John's and Auburn already locked it up with a week to go. Houston already locked theirs up as well. So be interesting to see how those teams come out and play this week motivationally. But yeah, I'm definitely hyped for conference tournaments, especially these smaller schools that will finally get some publicity on national networks, and it'll be fun to watch.
Yeah, for sure. So as I mentioned, ASUN starts tonight. For those of you sickos that care, we got the Horizon League, the NEC, Ohio Valley, and the Summit League starting between now and Wednesday. And then Thursday is really the first pretty marquee tournament that starts. That's the West Coast Conference. So Gonzaga, St. Mary's, of course. Now they've added Oregon State, Washington State, San Francisco's out there, Santa Clara. So that should be a fun tournament, I think. A much more competitive tournament than maybe it's been in years past.
Yeah, that'll be definitely a fun tournament. We talked about it a little bit. Like the WCC is deeper than really it ever has been, just especially with those other teams getting added, like Oregon State and Washington State and Santa Clara and San Francisco having pretty good seasons. But just a note real quick, like that conference tournament structure, may not be extremely popular, and it takes away from some games. I personally like it, just from getting the best mid-major into the tournament. Obviously this league is a little bit different, but because you're already going to have some bids in this league, like Gonzaga, St. Mary's are already locked in and they're going to be the 1-2. So in this instance, it kind of takes away from those other teams. But a conference like the Sun Belt, they're doing it this year. The 12 or 13 seed has to play 6 games in 6 days, and the 1 and 2 seeds kind of just waiting there in the semifinals. I think in those leagues, it makes a ton of sense to try to get your best team into the tournament, and it just makes your conference look a little bit better. I know it's a weird structure, and it takes away the parity of a conference tournament and what kind of it takes away from March a little bit, what March is all about. But I think personally, from a conference tournament standpoint, in these low major, mid-major leagues, I think it makes a lot of sense for the leagues to do this.
Yeah, I mean, from that perspective of getting your best team in, putting the best product of your conference out there, it definitely does. Obviously, when you're on the other end of that as a team, it's not so fun, but do better in the regular season, I guess.
I just think it's valuing teams in the what they did in the regular season. I think those teams should be rewarded a little bit more.
Yeah. But is this a conference you think we could potentially see a bid stealer? Could Oregon State maybe steal a bid?
Oregon, they're going to have to win 3 games, I believe. I think they're sitting on the 5. So they're going to have to beat the 12. I forget who the 12-13 matchup is, or whatever the matchup is. Some team has to play 6 games to get through. But they're going to have to play, I believe, Santa Clara in that second round. And then they'd have to play St. Mary's in the semifinals. So it would be a really tough stretch for them to get through. But
they hung around with St. Mary's yesterday.
They did. That might have been like a sleepy situation for St. Mary's, as you know, they've already locked up the WCC. Not sure they didn't really have anything to play for in that instance. Maybe just like NCAA tournament seeding, but
and it was senior night. That was like I was a little bit surprised that they kind of came out a little flat, but
yeah,
I guess
for sure. But I think you could see I think Santa Clara probably has the best chance out of all of them. I don't love the makeup of San Francisco right now, so I would say Santa Clara has the best chance.
Yeah. Could be interesting though. Who knows? But gonna cover a few games from the weekend. Just gonna quickly run through some results. First one, Auburn over Kentucky. This one, Kentucky was plus 4.5 here, and Auburn kind of put that to bed pretty quick. I think jumped out like 22-9 or something, with Miles Kelly scoring 14 points out of their first 22, and then he finished with 30, had 8 threes. Really dominant performance from him in their 16-point win over Kentucky.
Yeah, it kind of looked like a bad matchup from the start, and Kentucky turned the ball over a ton in this game. I don't know the exact number of turnovers, but that's pretty uncharacteristic for them.
Like 18.
Yeah, I just think the athleticism kind of overwhelmed them in this game, and Auburn's offense obviously had their way, putting up 94 points, and they kind of just ran away from it from the get-go.
Yeah. Next game, Tennessee over Alabama, 79-76. I didn't get to see a ton of this game, but I'd looked at the score and I kind of thought Alabama had it. And then all of a sudden, I see a notification pop up on my phone that Jemai Meshack hit a 35-footer to win it at the buzzer against Alabama, 79-76. Pretty miraculous way to win for Tennessee, and really helps their case for maybe, depending on what happens over the next couple of weeks, sliding into a 1 seed for those, people that may be a believer in them.
Yeah, there was a lot going on in the last 35 to 40 seconds in this game. Alabama was up 4, and I believe Tennessee went to the line, missed the second free throw, and Alabama fouled on the rebound and allowed Meshack to actually have an opportunity to knock down a couple of free throws to get it within 2. And then they eventually, or no, that was to actually tie it. But the real story was at the end of the game with 3 seconds left when Bama had the ball and in a tie game and with a chance to win it. And I think the ball went out of bounds off of Tennessee, but Bama was inbounding, and they get a 5-second violation called on them, and they had 2 timeouts left. So I just think it was the late game stuff from Oates and Alabama in general has been pretty poor, and they've just really struggled to make adjustments throughout games kind of all year long. And then before Meshack even hit that shot, like Rick Barnes was on the sideline just trying to call timeout for
Was Ziegler
2 seconds before that, and Ziegler, yeah, and they just never got granted, and I guess thankfully it never happened.
Yeah, but crazy way to win. We had a few buzzer beaters this week. Namari Burnett, as we talked about, for Michigan. Trey Holloman for Michigan State.
Yeah.
And then this one. So 3 pretty crazy finishes over the last 5 or 6 days. Next game, Vanderbilt over Missouri, 97-93 in overtime. Vanderbilt's on a heater here, 3 in a row, really solidifying themselves as nowhere near the bubble anymore. Beat Ole Miss, A&M, and now Missouri here over the last week. Now, if I'm not mistaken, they hit a 3 with under 10 seconds left to send this to overtime, and it really just goes back to the question of, do you foul up 3 or not? And I feel like more times than not, it comes back to bite teams when they don't. I think it's just the safer play to, especially on the road, just give the foul and take your chances.
Yeah, and I think the worst part about it was Missouri was, I believe they were trying to foul, and Grill kind of reached out for Hoggard and just never got to him. And then Hoggard got inside the arc, and what's his name? Pierce. Or no, I believe it was Pierce lost nickel in the corner, and he ended up hitting a 3. But yeah, it's definitely it's coach's preference, obviously, on whether you foul up 3 or not. But in that situation, you can't be half in and half out. Like, you need to, make that decision. You were in the perfect situation to foul up three. They had the ball. I think Vandy had the ball with like 8 seconds left. Like you could have really fouled at any point after he got to half court, and I think he would have been okay. But it kind of just seemed like nobody was actually bought into fouling there.
Yeah, no, but another great win for Vanderbilt. Next one, Florida hosted College Game Day yesterday. We'll talk about them a little bit more in a minute, but 89-70 over A&M, another convincing win for them. Despite losing to Georgia this week, got back on the right track here with a big win over a quality Texas A&M team. But A&M, we will talk about them again later as well. They're reeling a little bit right now. They've lost, I believe, 4 or 5 in a row.
Yeah, I think they're at 4 right now. They're just showing like some real offensive deficiencies. The thing is, this year they're turning the ball over way more than they typically do, and it's not good for a Buzz Williams team that is, trying to win the shot volume battle. Like obviously, offensive rebounding is a major part of that, but you need to be able to take care of the ball as well, and that's what last year's team did. And they've been pretty poor in that area this year, so just kind of takes away from this team's offensive value.
Yeah, they could use Boots Radford, I think.
They really could. Like the
Yeah.
replacement of Zurich Phelps, like obviously he does some better things defensively and he's a little bit more athletic, but he turns the ball over like nobody's business. So
Yeah.
having a guy like Boots Radford or even just like another traditional point guard by Taylor's side, I think would be kind of beneficial.
Right. We got Iowa State. They took down Arizona. Finally, got back in the win column with a quality win, 84-67. Arizona did cut this to 10, I believe, with about 3 minutes left, and then Iowa State ended up getting some easy ones in transition, knocked down some free throws, finished it off 84-67.
Yeah, Iowa State finally looked a little bit more like early season Iowa State, and they knocked down a ton of shots, especially in a row in the first half in this game. Like Momcilovic was unbelievable. One thing to know is like Keyshawn Gilbert, he came back, but he didn't really look all that great. He didn't look all that healthy either. He was turning the ball over a ton, and that's something to monitor with this Iowa State team is they're not taking care of the ball nearly as well as they did last year either, and that could end up biting them in the tournament for an offense that definitely has regressed a little bit from the beginning of the year, but they definitely showed flashes of the shot making that they had early on.
Yeah, seemed like first half they weren't going to miss a shot the whole night.
Yeah.
They had it going when they got up, whatever, 16-18, pretty quick. But yeah, when they're making shots, they're really fun. So, then a couple games today to quickly mention. Michigan State over Wisconsin, 71-62. Wisconsin actually had control of this game early. Second half, Michigan State they chipped away a little bit and then ultimately pulled ahead. It was pretty close, and then in the last 4 or 5 minutes, Michigan State really stretched it out, forced a few turnovers, got out in transition, ended up winning, as I said, 71-62. Another quality win for Michigan State, who I think that's 5 in a row for them, if I'm not mistaken. They're playing really good basketball right now.
Yeah, they're on an unbelievable run right now. They're just so well balanced, and like we talked about in one of the last episodes, just Jace Richardson emerging into a star has really changed the outlook on this team, and I think it's a team that could definitely go deep in March, as well as Wisconsin with their improved offense. Obviously, it wasn't as great today, only putting up 62, but I think these are two teams that can be dangerous in the tournament.
Yeah, and then last game, this was actually our only bet that we gave out for today. This was Illinois +3 against Michigan. They were at Michigan. Michigan's luck finally ran out, lost 93-73 at home. This game was back and forth in the first half. Illinois was up 31-30 at halftime. Then in the second half, Illinois' efficiency went through the roof. They were getting pretty much whatever they wanted. They banked in a 3 or 2. I know they banked in at least 2 in this game. Yakachonis banked one in, and they had one more in the second half. But really convincing win for them. They seem to be, aside from Morris Johnson, they seem to be getting healthy. Boswell looked good today. So they're a really interesting team because they have their flaws. I think they attempt the 5th most threes in the country, but they're 331st in 3-point percentage. So an interesting stat. because when they're hot, they're hot. They take a lot of threes, and if they're making them, like, they can beat anybody. But Michigan's luck, as I said, finally ran out. Like, they had this coming.
Yeah, I mean, Michigan's guard play is just regressing a ton, especially from the beginning of the year. Like Donaldson, he looked like a really good guard for about half the year. He's sort of looks like he's kind of lost his confidence out there, and he's just not playing nearly as well. And Roddy Gale's been pretty terrible all year long, and like they tried to replace him with Reuben Jones a little bit, and he's just not the same caliber of offensive. He doesn't give you the same offensive punch that you know a guy like Donaldson gives you in the backcourt. But yeah, this team's definitely just regressing overall. And also, we talked about it before we started recording, but Illinois every 6 games looks like one of the best teams in the country. But it's just a matter of how many threes they're going to make on a given night. And we did think they were going to potentially change the way they played a little bit, trying to get more rim attempts. But obviously, no more as Johnson has kind of hurt that. And yeah, if Illinois stays on like the 7-8 line, like it's very unfortunate for a 1 or 2 seed in the tournament, because if they have a game like they played today, Illinois is probably going to beat a 1 or 2 seed.
Yeah, no, they're very capable, but they're also capable of losing to a pretty bad team. So
For sure.
We'll see what their fate holds. They're going to be one of the hardest teams, I think, to predict come tournament time when you're filling out your brackets. So
they're going to be very popular too on that 8 line as like that upset pick over a 1 seed. But I don't know if I'd completely buy into it or not.
Yeah, maybe in like 1 out of 25 brackets or something.
Yeah.
Anyway, I wanted to give a couple shout outs for this week and really for this season. As we head into the last week of the regular season for these power conferences. First one, Mark Byington, head coach at Vanderbilt, got them to a 20-win season. They're 8-8 in the conference. I think they're sitting at the 8 seed right now in the SEC. Super impressive what they've been able to do. He brought this team together with a bunch of guys that came from really all over. McLaughlin came from BC, and Hogard from Michigan State, and Jason Edwards from North Texas, and they got a couple guys from Virginia Tech. And really, he got them meshing very quickly, right? They succeeded in non-conference and then jumped into conference play. They've had their ups and downs, but they're playing really good basketball right now. Tyler Nichols been incredible the last few weeks. I think he hit 7 threes against Texas A&M on Tuesday, which is a career high for him. We gave out that pick, I think, by the way.
Yeah.
Right. So, just huge shout out to Vanderbilt here. A team I was on early in the year, just with the moves they made. I just really like the guard play. And Mark Byington, I'm buying him as a coach. So, impressed with what they've been able to do in his first season in the SEC.
Yeah. And, we said it before the season even started. Like, if Vanderbilt's going to be 500 in the league, like, does Byington win SEC Coach of the Year? Like, I don't think it's going to happen, even though, like, we're at this point. We talked about it. Like, we did think it was probably going to happen if he could get his team to 8-8, 9-8 in the league, or the 18 games of the league. Like, even if they win 2 games this week, there's going to be some real conversations. But obviously, Auburn and Bruce Pearl have been fantastic. So I'm assuming it'll end up going to him, but it's definitely a good call by you in the preseason. So,
yeah. And then the next team I really wanted to talk about, I feel like we probably don't give them enough screen time on here, and that's Florida. They did lose a game this week, but that was a game they were on the road at Georgia and got down 25, and they actually ended up coming back to take the lead against the Georgia team who's playing much better right now. Like, they're playing pretty solid basketball. That game was like 45-20, and Florida came back to take the lead with like under 2 minutes to go, I believe. Ended up losing by 5 or 6, but I think that right there is a true testament to the type of team that they are, right? They have really good guard play. They're able to score in bunches, right? So they're never really out of a game. They have the advantage in pretty much every game on the boards. They're a really big team with depth everywhere, and very well coached by Todd Golden. So, they really put the hammer down last night against Texas A&M, who we said was reeling a little bit, but still a great win. And Florida's, found themselves in a great position to end up as a 1 seed here in a couple weeks.
Yeah, I mean, they've been great all year long, and yeah, the most surprising thing about this team is the guard depth. I had my reserves on the guard depth early in the season and the lack of like a true point guard presence, but Denzel Aberdeen and Klavchar being your fourth and fifth guards like seems like a really good problem to have at this point. And there's depth all over the floor. Obviously, the front court has a ton of depth, and it's just the improvement of this entire roster, or like even guys like that have been noticeable for me, like Denzel Aberdeen, obviously would be the number one guy on that list, but Tommy Haug as well. Like the improvement, especially shooting wise, has been pretty stark from last year to this year. And like at the free throw line, last time I checked, he was shooting like 78% at the line. He was like a 45% free throw shooter last year. And just throughout the entire roster, like Will Richard improving on the defensive side of the ball. I just think
Richard's
the player
really
development, the player development at Florida has to be just top notch. I don't know exactly what it is, and I don't know like the assistants on that staff all that well, but I think they're just doing an incredible job. And this is probably a program you need to buy long-term stock in as long as Todd Golden is there.
Yeah, no, I agree. They're in a really good spot right now, and their continued success and the jump from, despite losing in the first round last year, the jump to then this year, kind of reloading with the loss of like Zion Pullen, Tyrese Samuel. They bounced right back, picked up some guys in the portal, retained what they had, and put together a really good team. So shout out to the Gators. They're going to be probably one of the most popular picks to win it all come March, outside of Duke and Auburn.
Yeah, I thought Pullen was going to be a big loss just because he was like the true point guard presence on this team. But Walter Clayton has proved me wrong to an extent, and they can kind of play by committee anyway. But yeah, I mean they've just done a great job over there in Gainesville
for sure. Now I'm going to move into some bubble talk now. Going to discuss some teams on the bubble, where we see them now with 2 weeks to go until the bracket's released. Some of these teams have hurt their stock. Unfortunately, my Texas Longhorns have played their way out of the tournament at this point, unfortunately, but I'm not really sure I even wanted to watch them in March anyway. We'll one of our topics here coming up will have to do with coaches we might see, or teams we might see a coaching change in. So that will definitely be one to talk about with Texas, I think. But enough about them. First team we're going to discuss on the bubble is Arkansas. Really, really interesting one, right? Because they've had a pretty rocky season. Picked up second half of SEC play this week. Beat Texas at home in overtime, and then put up a dud yesterday at South Carolina. One of the worst offensive performances of the year, really. I don't know how many threes they end up making a three. I know they started like 0 for 16. So
yeah, they made 3 of them.
So pretty ugly. I don't really know what to make of this Arkansas team. I know Adu Thiero was out, correct, yesterday. He was out again. Without him, it's pretty uncertain. I think they're going to end up missing the tournament at this point, especially if he's not in. I think they're going to struggle this week. I don't know who they play this week. Do you have their?
Yeah, it could be another 0-2. It could be an 0-2 week. They're at Vandy and at home against Mississippi State. But if they don't have Thiero, I think this offense really takes a hit, especially with the lack of shooting that they have. They can't throw in like a stretch 3 or 4 into their lineup to help out the spacing. So I could easily see them going 0-2 this week and playing their way out. But I mean, as of now, I do think they're in the tournament. Just they do have a lot of good wins, obviously, as we've talked about with the SEC. Like there's good wins at every turn. There's really no true bad losses. Like you look at South Carolina on the road, I don't know what quad that is. It's probably Q2 if I had to guess. Like and that's a team that was 1-13 in the SEC. So, yeah, without Theoro, I think they play their way out. But if he comes back this week, I think they can win one of these two games and end up, being on the 10 or 11 line.
Yeah. Next team, Georgia. This week obviously picked up a huge resume builder with a win against Florida and then won at Texas yesterday in pretty convincing fashion. I think they've maybe played their way in right now. They're probably right there. If I had to guess, they're in. But this week they're at South Carolina and home to Vanderbilt. I think for them, it's really going to depend on how they do this week and then what they do in the conference tournament. If they lose first round, I think you could see them packing their bags early for Cancun, but we'll see. I'm going to say they're going to end up out, but that win over Florida certainly helps their case.
Yeah, it definitely does. And then the fact that they finally got a road win, I think kind of helps, but they didn't have a road win in SEC play up until that game. And that win over Florida might ultimately get them in. It's just, again, like, it's going to depend on how the committee values a team that's 6-10 in their own league at this point in the season. I think, like, personally, we've already talked about it a little bit, but I do think a lot of these teams deserve to be in. I think a lot of them have much better resumes than some teams in other power leagues, like the ACC. Obviously, we've discussed at times here. And this week, I mean, they're at South Carolina, which could be a landmine. We just saw it with Arkansas, and they're going to host Vandy to end the season. So if they split and get a win in the SEC tournament, I think they should pretty comfortably be in. But I could see them going 0-3 and it getting a little bit dicey. I did see on Bracket Matrix some bracketologists have them on the 9 line, but consensus has them at 11. So I think it'll depend on how they value that win at home against Florida and how much that elevates them. But at the moment, I think they're in. And if they go 1-1 this week, I think they stay in.
Get them out. Get all these teams out.
It's weird. There's so many teams on the bubble that I absolutely hate.
I hate the bubble this year. Like,
it's terrible.
Like, there's just a lot of mid teams, and obviously, like, that's kind of what the bubble is, right? It's like, but yeah. I don't. So many of these teams are so flawed. I just have a problem with a lot of them. So I'm at the point of, like, let's just make it a 16-team tournament. Get all these bums out of here, and let's just play.
It's just the drop off from the 8-9 seed line to, like, the actual bubble is absolutely massive. Like, Vandy's looking like an 8-9 seed at the moment, and Gonzaga's sitting on the 9 line, Illinois, BYU, Creighton, UConn. Like, I think those teams are all, like, vastly better than these teams on the bubble.
I mean, all of those teams have been ranked this year.
Yeah.
All those, like, Vanderbilt's probably going to be ranked tomorrow.
Yeah, but they should be. I mean, they've had way too many good wins to not be ranked. So
yeah. Next team here, talked about them probably way too much for this podcast, but North Carolina,
get them out.
They're playing as good a basketball as anyone right now for who they're playing. They're doing exactly what they need to do against the bums that they're playing. I still don't think it warrants them being in because they still don't have really any quality wins. I mean, they beat Syracuse by 6, and that game ended up being a lot closer than it should have been. NC State they handled. Virginia they handled. They ended up pulling away against Florida State. Handled Miami, but, like, they have Virginia Tech. They play them Tuesday, and then they got Duke. Like, none of those wins, as you've said, Cody, in previous episodes, really do anything for you. Like, they're not needle movers. So, to me, like, if they can win on Saturday against Duke, then I'll hear you out. But until then, like, I don't see them in the tournament.
I don't either. Like, your best win in league play is against SMU. Like, I really
hasn't beaten anybody.
they haven't beaten anyone either. I mean, there's really not many opportunities to beat anybody in this league, but when they have had opportunities, they haven't capitalized. You played Louisville to open up conference play or like to open up the new year, and they lost that game by double digits, got smoked by Clemson, and in an all-time very good spot, especially from a betting perspective for North Carolina, and they lost by 20 on the road. Like
And
with
that
Clemson coming
game
off that win
game
against
wasn't even
Duke
that
on
close.
1 day rest. No, it was a murder. And they haven't done anything for me. And I think, did they pick up any wins in Maui? Did they beat Dayton to open up Maui? Like
Yeah, then they
there's
lost.
not enough wins on this resume. They're still 1-10 against quad one. It's just, it doesn't do anything for me.
Maui, because then they lost to Auburn and Michigan State, I believe, in Maui.
Yeah. If they beat Duke, they should still be bubble territory. I just don't think they've done enough, but obviously you'd be on the right side of the bubble with a win against Duke. And the fact that, you are UNC, it gives you a little bit of an extra boost. I don't like to believe those narratives, but they're probably true.
Yeah. No doubt. Now, the next team, Wake Forest, I don't really have much to say. I watched them way too much this week. I watched pretty much both of their games. Get them out of my tournament. Got really handled at home against Virginia. Allowed Virginia to shoot the highest percentage they've shot all year in conference play. They just don't seem to have any fight, right? That's a game they were playing for their lives for this season. That was their season. And they were on the right side of the bubble going into that game, lost it. And then yesterday got down double digits in the second half against a very poor Notre Dame team, again at home. Ended up coming back to win, but I still don't think it's just been ugly for them. I see them out and not really any chance to get back in.
Yeah, and guess who they beat? North Carolina.
Yeah. Yeah.
They beat North Carolina, and North Carolina has no good wins. I don't see either one of these teams being able to make the tournament. I mean, Wake, they beat Michigan earlier in the year. That win has aged pretty well, but I don't really think they've done enough either. And they're gonna have an opportunity tomorrow at Duke. Maybe they pull off a miracle somehow, but I mean, obviously, I don't see it happening. They're a 20-point dog, which kind of says all that needs to be said about the rest of the ACC. This is the top half ACC team getting 20 points against. Obviously, it's a top tier team, but still, you really shouldn't be getting 20 points as a top half ACC team. So, yeah, get both of these teams out.
Yeah. Next one, Oklahoma. They really had a chance to kind of solidify themselves as in yesterday. They squandered that game late against Ole Miss. They kind of had to claw back into it, but then really had control in the last minute or so. They got up to Jamin Brakefield missed 3 of 4 free throws in the last minute and a half. Padula missed one in the last 2 minutes. I think Ole Miss went 2 of 6 from the foul line in the last 2 minutes. So they really had a chance here to finish this one off, but ultimately didn't. I hate to say it because I really wish this team would miss, but unless they go 0-2 this week, I think they're in, which I actually do predict them to go 0-2 this week, unless Texas next Saturday is just completely flat on their face, no motivation, done. But it's a rivalry game. It's senior day for Texas. I don't see them just laying down for that one, because Texas, I think, still is going to want to have some hope, especially if they can win a couple games in the SEC tournament. But I think Oklahoma, if they can split this week, I think they're in. If they go 0-2, I think they're out.
Yeah, I mean, they're sitting at 4-12 in the league right now. They go 0-2, they're going to be 4-14 to finish conference play, and they're still going to be somehow sitting on the bubble, which is crazy. It just shows the depth of this league. But they did a lot of work in non-conference, and obviously they went 13-0 in non-con with some really good wins. But their actual the actual quality of this team would tell me that they're not an at-large team, but they may have done enough, especially if they can split this week, get that home win against Missouri, and obviously you're going to have a chance against Texas in a rivalry game on the road. But Yeah, like you said, I think if they split, I think they definitely have a chance, and then get a win in the SEC tournament, maybe 2 wins, and they can find their way in.
Yeah. I'm going to pair these next two teams together, Ohio State, Nebraska, because they play each other Tuesday night. And both teams, to me, I think Ohio State their win against Kentucky has been extremely overvalued. And hopefully the committee's starting to realize that. I don't think Ohio State's all that good. They have some quality wins, but they also have some really bad losses. And as for Nebraska, they've struggled over the last week and a half, 2 weeks, lost 3 or 4 in a row, I believe. I think the loser of this game is certainly out, unless they get hot in the Big Ten tournament. But I think the winner just kind of remains right there firmly on that bubble line. I don't really know, this Big Ten tournament, who knows how it might go. Because either of these teams, depending on the path they get, I think could go on a little bit of a run because they've shown they can beat anyone, but they can also lose to anyone. So I'm going to go out and say the loser of this game can forget it.
Yeah, I mean, I think both of these teams are on the bubble. I think Nebraska is more comfortably in at the moment, according to Bracket Matrix, than Ohio State. Like Ohio State's like the last team in for Bracket Matrix, and Nebraska's sitting on the 10 line. So maybe Nebraska has a little more wiggle room. I think they have more quantity of like good wins this year, and Ohio State has like some of the bigger wins of the year. Obviously, that win over Kentucky was big. This win, or whoever loses this game, I think you could consider them to be out, especially if Nebraska's going to host Iowa this weekend, so that's not really a needle mover, and they're going to have to pick up a couple wins in the Big Ten tournament to feel good. But just for like the actual quality of these teams, I don't want either one of these teams really in. I just think they're a little bit too volatile. Like Ohio State, like kind of living off of their shot making, and Nebraska and their defense living off of other teams' 3-point shooting ability. These are just two teams I would rather not see in the tournament.
Yeah, unless we can get Devin Royal on a Sunday.
Yeah, that's one of the best players in the country.
So if we could get Devin Royal in the round of 32, if they could get Ohio State on Friday, Sunday, he plays in the round of 32, could be trouble for teams. Last team we're going to mention out there, ACC, SMU. I have nothing to say other than they're out. They haven't beaten anybody. Their resume's not good. Get them out.
Yeah, I just think they were kind of getting away with beating all of the teams that they needed to beat. But at this point, I think they're coming off of back-to-back losses. Oh, no, they beat Cal. They split the West Coast trip, lost to Stanford. Yeah, they don't have any good wins, like we've said. Like that game last Saturday against Clemson was kind of like the make it or break it for this team, and they ended up losing by 10 at home. So, yeah, I would say get this team out as well. And at this point, like what teams can even get in from the ACC besides Duke, Clemson, and Louisville? I don't really see like a great path for any teams, and I think that's how I would prefer it. Those 3 actual quality teams. These other 3 seem to be a little bit more fake.
Unless we get another bid stealer like NC State last year.
Yeah, I'd rather not see that. Like I know a lot of people love these Cinderellas and stuff, but I don't want a team like NC State in my Final Four. Like I want the 4 best teams in the country to be playing in the Final Four. I think that makes for a way more exciting tournament. So
yeah. Speaking of Louisville, before we move on, how about Chucky Hepburn yesterday? Career high 37. I think he hit 6 threes or something. He's been incredible. Yeah. But now we're going to talk some mid-major leagues to fear in the NCAA tournament. Got a few to shout out here. First 2, Big West and Missouri Valley. Those are really the 2 of note. Headlined by UC San Diego, UC Irvine in the Big West, then Drake, Bradley, Northern Iowa in the Missouri Valley.
Yeah, these are just 2 leagues that I wanted to shout out. Like, I would take some teams from like the American WCC. Obviously, we talked about a little bit, like the A10. I don't really view those as like true mid-major leagues. So I kind of just wanted to, shine a little light on a conference like the Big West that I've talked about a little bit on here before. And obviously, I want to see UC San Diego get in from this league, but I think there's 5 teams from this conference that can win a tournament game or two. I just think the top half of this league is that good. And like UC Irvine, obviously, they have one of the best defenses in the country. I think CSUN or Cal State Northridge is a team to really watch out for. It's kind of like a Nebraska style defense. So if teams can't shoot over the top of them, I think they're going to end up, coming up with a big upset win, or especially over a team that can't shoot. And like UC Riverside and UCSB have some of the more talented guards at the mid-major level. We talked about Steph Swinson a little bit, and yeah, there's just a ton of talent on those teams that they have a lot of upside to take down a power team on like the 5 or 6 line. So definitely a league that I'm really excited about, really excited to watch their conference tournament. And then the Missouri Valley, that I believe that conference tournament starts on Thursday. It's Arch Madness, probably my favorite mid-major conference tournament to watch. There's 3 teams from this league that I'd be like very excited about if they got in. It'd be Drake, Bradley, and Northern Iowa. Drake with their slow pace, and they have the ability to take down not anyone in the country, but their style allows them to hang in with pretty much anyone. And they showed that early in the season when they won the Charleston Classic, and they beat Vanderbilt, who, that win has aged extremely well, and they kind of dominated them from the jump. They beat them by double digits. And for Bradley, I think they have shooting across the board to have the upside to take down a power team. And same thing with Northern Iowa. I think they run some beautiful offense, and they have a ton of great shooting to take down a power conference team.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, there's some really good basketball that's been played in especially in the Big West. I've been really impressed with UC San Diego. UC Irvine's had their blips of bad basketball, but they're still, a force to be reckoned with Luyten, or however you even say his name. They're holding down the middle. As we've talked about, they've got some out of shape dudes on that team.
They do. I don't know what they're doing with their strength and conditioning program or what their dietitian's up to, but yeah. But I mean, they get it done. Their defense, there's really no weaknesses on that side of the ball, and all those guys move their feet extremely well for their size. So yeah, definitely there's so many more dangerous teams, and the casual fan kind of looks at it when a mid-major is on the 12-13 line and beating these 4s and 5s and acting like it's a miracle when these things happen. But these teams, like these teams in the Big West, are really, really good all year, and nobody really realizes it until the first weekend of the tournament.
Right. Yeah. But we'll have a lot more of this type of talk here coming in the next couple of weeks as we prep for the tournament. We're going to be doing some breakdowns of the conference tournaments, especially the big ones. So stay tuned for that. Now, before we wrap things up, going to quickly go through a few game previews for this week. First one, I don't have a ton to say about. Kansas at Houston. I think this is just a Houston win. Houston's minus 10 in this game. Kansas, I think, is just really going to struggle in this one. Going on the road, they just don't have good enough guard play. They just haven't been consistent enough, especially on the road. I think Houston gets the job done here without really any trouble. And Kansas, they're 6th in the Big 12 right now, which is very unusual. But, I think that they can't get it done in this one.
Yeah, I mean, there's a real chance for them to go 10-10 in this league. Like they close it out at home against Arizona. That's obviously not a guarantee. So for this team to finish at 500 in the league would be pretty insane. But yeah, I do expect Houston to win this game. I don't think Kansas has enough weak side shooting to take them down here. Like we talked about it a little bit, or at least on the side. Like Rylan Griffin just hasn't panned out at all. He needs to be able to shoot to bring value to this team, and he's not a sniper by any means. I think he's shooting probably in the 34, 35 range. I don't have the exact number, but he hasn't been good enough, and it's putting a lot of pressure on Zeke Mayo to hit shots at an elite clip. So yeah, I do think Houston gets it done, even though they've locked up the Big 12. I still think they're playing for seeding. I think they're playing to get onto that 1 seed line, and Kelvin Sampson's teams never really step off the gas. So I do expect them to have success here.
Yeah. Next game, Auburn at Texas A&M. This line projects at Auburn -6. I actually think this line might be shorter than that. Not sure
Yeah.
though. I expect it to be just because of one, Texas A&M spot. Coming off 4 straight losses at home against the number 1 team in the country. Auburn's locked up the SEC title. So maybe if there's some guys that have some nagging things, maybe they sit them or limit minutes or something like that. I know Broom's ankle's been a bit of an issue. I don't expect him to sit, but I think that this is a great spot for Texas A&M to get back on the right track. I don't know if they're going to win, but I think they're going to be playing with their hair on fire in this one. I'm going to go out on a limb and say Texas A&M wins this game in a close one, but I expect it to be a really good basketball game.
Yeah, I agree. I think A&M wins this game, regardless of what I think of both teams. Like, I do think this Auburn team kind of takes their foot off the gas pedal, and possibly a guy like Chad Baker-Mazara sits out as well. He's been dealing with some injuries, and we talked about earlier in the year with like Tennessee when they hosted Florida, that being like the spot of the entire season. And I think every bettor on Twitter was all over Tennessee in that game. Ended up working out, obviously. This might take the cake as the new spot of the year. I mean, A&M coming off of 4 losses, Auburn locking up the SEC. They're going to play with their hair on fire and get all over the offensive glass in this game. So I actually do expect them to win. And I probably would think this line opens at like +2, +2.5, just because the spot is going to be crazy. And the markets know that. It's just going to be so taxed.
Yeah, for sure. We also have BYU at Iowa State. This game also on Tuesday night, I believe. BYU running really hot right now. Iowa State, obviously, as we said, got back on the right track on Saturday over Arizona. Find themselves back at home here. This line projects at Iowa -4, -4.5. I think they get the job done here. I think that BYU is being a little bit overvalued in the market. I think they get a win at home.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think Iowa State can turn over BYU at a pretty high clip. BYU's ball handling is a little bit suspect, and especially with Yegor Demon in the backcourt.
Richie Saunders dribbles it well.
Yeah, I mean, they kind of have to rely on Dallin Hall at times. When Demon's throwing the ball away, he gets put on the bench, and Hall comes in and tries to be the acting point guard. And he's fine. He's a veteran. He knows what he's doing in the backcourt. But I do think Iowa State can turn them over like pretty close to 15 in the 15 to 20 range. And BYU is going to have to make 14 or 15 threes to win this game, which they absolutely can do. I think Hilton Magic is probably going to end up with probably a 10 to 15 point win here.
Yeah. We also have Maryland at Michigan Wednesday. This should be another fun game. Let's see. Where's this project at? Michigan -1.5. So, I don't really know yet what I think about this game in terms of outcome. I expect this to be a solid game. Michigan going to be looking to bounce back off that loss today. I guess tentatively I would say Michigan probably wins this game, but I also think that Maryland has the size to hang in and the athleticism to hang in with Michigan's bigs and way better guard play. Like I think Maryland's a way better team, but spot could come into play here. I think I've actually convinced myself. I think Maryland's going to win this
game. Good for you to talk through it there and come to the conclusion. But I do think these front courts can match each other, and I think that's advantage Maryland because they have a pretty significant advantage in the backcourt, in my opinion. I think Jacoby Gillespie is a massive upgrade over Trey Donaldson and the other two guards, and Miguel and Rice can hit way more shots than Michigan in this game. So I think the key to slowing down this Michigan team is slowing down the front court combo, and I think Maryland can do that. So I'll take Maryland on the road. Not super convinced by it, but just because Michigan's coming off that blowout loss to Illinois here on Sunday, so I'll lean Maryland to win that game, but nothing strong.
Yeah. Then the last one, Florida at Alabama, probably the game of the week. Alabama projects -4. Alabama coming off the loss, Florida coming off their bounce back win. Florida's fared pretty well on the road. as we've seen. They went at Auburn and won, shorthanded even. I just think this one's going to be tough for them to win. Feels like Alabama recently has had a lot of these key games at home. And I think they rally behind their home crowd again and get the job done. And what I expect to be a really good game.
Yeah, and I think Florida can guard Alabama pretty similarly to how Auburn guarded them. So I do see some advantages for Florida in this game, and their ability to get on the offensive glass could potentially eat Alabama alive a little bit, who's a little bit weak on the defensive glass. So my gut is kind of saying Florida can go on the road and get this win, but again, nothing really strong. I think Alabama they go as their 3-point shot making goes in these big games. So, and they can obviously make 15 or 16 on any given night. So my gut says Florida. I'll go Florida to win this game, but I could easily see Alabama winning at home.
Yeah. Should be a fun last week of games. Obviously, some of these teams in the power conferences are jockeying for position in the conference tournament, trying to avoid certain spots, trying to get themselves to certain spots. So enjoy the games. We do have, as I said, a bunch of conference tournaments starting up or that have already started up. So learn your mid-majors, get ready for your brackets, and enjoy all the basketball that's going to be played here over the next 6 weeks. But other than that, we'll talk to you next time in our Best Bets episode.